The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed. Here the founders state to keep the nation free. People have the right to keep and bear arms. The why is pretty clear. Keep and protect freedom. Protect our freedom. James Madison, who initially proposed these amendments on June the 8th of 1789, which by the way was only 6 years after we signed the Treaty of Paris, ending the war with King George, proposed these amendments. The final agreement happened with England, or on our boundaries with England, in 1795, after they were proposed. The Bill of Rights was passed within 8 years of a bloody war where our people took up their own weapons and overthrew a tyrannical government. It is clear to me that the authors of the Second Amendment intended to provide the citizens a means to defend freedom against government, whether it's at home or abroad. The Second Amendment, while it allows citizens to protect themselves from other citizens, goes well beyond just allowing us to defend ourselves from a criminal. Consider the timing of its writing, and I just went over that. The men who penned and ratified this document gave us the right to keep and bear arms as an ultimate checks and balances on the federal government. When considering magazine size or weapon type, comments like, "You don't need a 10-round magazine to hunt deer," completely misses the point of the Second Amendment. If the Founding Fathers meant weapons in the hands of the citizens was only for hunting, why would they say for the security of a free state? As yet, there have been no documented overthrows of any country that I'm aware by the deer population. From a practical standpoint, with the purpose being to protect people from tyranny and secure a free state, the citizenry should be allowed to maintain whatever weapon the federal government has. If they can have an aircraft carrier, I ought to be able to have an aircraft carrier.
Where's my Cobra?
Although I probably couldn't park it in Johnny Piper's marina down there.
For a fee.
Further, the argument suggesting that banning weapons somehow decreases crime is utterly false. The Wall Street Journal published a great op-ed, and if you haven't read it, I encourage you to find it. It was published by a guy by the name of John Lott in the January 17th edition of the Wall Street Journal. And in it, he makes 3 points. First, he talks about all these studies that Dianne Feinstein from California has talked about. The follow-up studies showed no decrease in crime during the assault weapons ban. And interestingly enough, after the ban was lifted, crime went down. Crime went down, both in the number of cases and in the lethality of the cases. The op-ed piece continues, though, with what I think is the most important point of the whole thing, and that is this. Since 1950, with one exception, last year's shooting in Tucson, every single mass shooting in the United States where 3 or more people have been killed occurred where guns were prohibited. Since 1950. Guns are not the problem. The framers of our Constitution and the amendments that are intended to protect the citizens and allow the citizens to protect themselves are wisdom that are age and time transcendent. As the president of the NRA recently said, and if you know the quote, say it with me, the only guy who can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Whether protecting themselves from a tyrannical government or from a criminal bent on destruction, citizens of this nation have a right to keep and, when necessary, bear arms. And I, along with most of you, I imagine, will defend that right as long as there is breath in my lungs. Thank you for today, and thank you for your fight for freedom. Thank you. I'm going to come out and answer those questions.
Mark, what is Tennessee doing right now? Where we stand?
Sounds like you want to ask them as a group. Okay. The question was, what are we doing in Tennessee about gun rights? There's a couple of things. Senate Bill 108, which they're actually working on some special language of it. It did not get out of committee. They're still working on it, and it should come up for a vote next week. I'll be voting yes on this bill. All of us that are concealed carry permit holders, we're protecting your information. The reason it didn't get out of committee is there was a clause in it that allowed people for political purposes to come and get the list. And I know what the intent of that is. It's if I'm going to run an ad because I'm campaigning, to be able to tell all of you guys where I stand on guns, I want you to know that. And so the guy who wrote the bill, I knew what his intentions were. They're good. But that opens up a door, what is political purposes? So they're rewriting that and narrowing that down, and hopefully it'll be clarified appropriately, and then I'll see that next week, I think on Tuesday, in the Judiciary Committee. Senate Bill 250, which was written by May Beavers. I encourage you to go and watch the videotape you can go online to the Tennessee State Senate and look at the videotape of the Judiciary Committee when that bill was debated. It really included debate about the founding of this country, where we argued about what the Founding Fathers meant in terms of the Second Amendment, what they meant in terms of the Supremacy Clause to the Constitution, and it really gets at the heart of a lot of key issues in this battle. Essentially, the bill said that it is illegal for the federal government. Basically, we were writing a Tennessee law that made it illegal for the federal government to come into Tennessee and execute or implement a ban on guns of any kind. And I voted for that bill. However, it did not get enough votes. So that bill stayed in committee. And we tried a petition to get it brought up again on the calendar to get voted on, and so far that hasn't happened. But you can call the other senators in the Judiciary Committee, and you can again look it up. You can look it up on that debate that happened on that video, find out who didn't vote for it, and then you can call those guys and say, hey, can we bring Senate Bill 250 back up? It's a good bill. The argument about whether or not we can nullify a law of the federal government as a state, that's a very good argument. And I would submit to you that if a federal law is unconstitutional, then we as a state can nullify that law. I mean, we can't. Other states have passed that bill in their state. Little different wording, but they've passed it. So I'm hopeful that thing will be brought back up and we'll get to vote on it again, and I'll vote again for it. So, other questions? Yes, sir.
Elaborate on the UBC, Universal Background Check.
Universal background checks. That issue has not come up at the state level. I mean, that's a question for Marsha Blackburn, but they are attempting, by bringing it up, I'm sure you're aware, they're attempting to have background checks on any exchange of a firearm. So basically, if you're at a gun show, you couldn't sell a weapon if you're not a dealer. Right now, I'm not a dealer, so I could sell my weapon to anybody I wanted to. They're talking about basically taking that right away from you. So that's what a UBC is.
Well, I think it's a little more in this since the state is federal, very regular firearms.
Did everybody hear what the gentleman said? The UBC does what probably the more concerning piece of it is it requires, or it allows the federal government to take a transaction or to record the transaction. Another bill to go back to Mark Weekly's question that we're doing in the state of Tennessee is you can't copy, like we're even regulating the photocopying of the application for a gun. So you can only make so many copies of that thing. We're doing our best to be within what federal law says on that, but restricting the rights, or I'm sorry, protecting the rights of our people in Tennessee. So in terms of the UBC though, he's right. The real sinister part of that is the federal government gets to track the transaction. So, other questions? Yes sir, way back in the back.
I was reading about that thing they had on the vets they're saying basically you're a vet.
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't hear you. Taking rights away from vets?
Yeah, referring to when they go to mental health or
I've been downrange, and I know that there are people who kind of struggle with some of those issues, and it's appropriate to. PTSD is real. There are people who really struggle with it. It's real. But when you get that diagnosis, you have to be very careful, because right now the law is worded that if you have a mental health diagnosis, they can prevent you from getting a gun. So my warning is to the veteran. This is the Veterans Administration and the physician. That's a decision between that veteran and the soldier. Be careful about the diagnosis you let your doctor tag you with. Not PTSD, I don't think. But with PTSD often comes a diagnosis of depression. So that one they can. Other questions? Yes, sir. What's that?
Small arm act that has not yet been ratified. Maybe next week. Or that gets ratified in the UN.
What's the chances? I mean, the last article I saw said they may not have, because they have to. I think it's worded they have to get every single state to sign it, right?
Right now, nobody can come to consensus on one of it on the UN floor. They're going to go around again next week and see if they can get that thing ratified.
I'll tell you, there's
that then goes to Congress. Senate.
Well, even if they ratify a treaty, and I know the Supremacy Clause tries to say that the treaties can become the law of the land, and then and that's all in the section on Supremacy Clause. So a lot of people are very worried about that. But when I was defending Senate Bill 250, and if you go look at the videotape, Gary, you can see it. I bring up a case from the Supreme Court where a soldier and his wife were deployed to England just after the Second World War. Actually, it was after Korea. It was like in the 50s, I believe, 1957. And the Supreme Court heard the case. She killed her husband in England. And the treaty between the United States and England said that if that happens, the military would try her. Well, that violated her Bill of Rights amendments in the fourth and sixth Bill of Rights amendments to the Bill of Rights. So the Supreme Court said that the Bill of Rights trumped the treaty. And that's a great case for this issue with the treaty on the UN small arms ban.
I don't know if this clears things up studies further, but it may not be congressional. Obama's already said he'll sign that. The
observation is would on the small arms ban treaty at the UN, could Obama sign the treaty and make it law without the Congress ratification, the Senate's ratification? The answer to that, I believe, is yes, he can try to do that. Many treaties have been made without the Senate's approval. But again, the Supreme Court has already ruled in the case that I mentioned, and I wish I could remember the case so you could go look it up directly, but if you look at the videotape from my testimony that I gave in the Senate hearing, my point was that the Supremacy Clause, and which that treaty essentially became law of the land when it was signed, didn't supersede the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was still primary. So we could nullify a federal law that restricts our Second Amendment rights. That was the argument I was trying to make in the committee. And of course, we didn't have enough votes, but I genuinely believe that Supreme Court decision supports our ability to basically say the Second Amendment trumps the Supremacy Clause, and therefore any treaty that the federal government makes.
United States versus Cruikshank, I believe is what that one is.
What is it?
U.S. United States versus Cruikshank, something like that, 1875.
Well, the one I'm talking about is in the 1950s, okay. and the woman had killed her husband in England, and they tried her in a military court and found her guilty. She appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in her favor that the treaty under which she was tried did not supersede the Bill of Rights. So the treaty was undone by the Bill of Rights, which is exactly what we would want, and what I believe is the case with the Second Amendment too. So.
What can we do to support this, and what can we do to support you and help you grow further?
The question is, what can we do to support the continued advancement and dialogue and fight for our rights? Well, join organizations, okay? So if you're not and I'll tell you, I am a member of all of them. So NRA, Gun Owners of America, those are two great organizations. Tennessee Firearms Association, great organizations. There's other organizations too, like things like Whitetail Unlimited, Deer Unlimited, Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl, Wild Turkey Federation. Those guys, and the what's the R stand for? Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. These guys are also out there fighting for our gun rights. Many of them are because of the tradition of hunting, but they're all communicating the message. And then if you have a congressman or a senator or a state representative who is fighting for your rights, then of course those guys need support. They need help to stay in office and to defend those rights for you. Unfortunately, I can't solicit campaign contributions right now, Mark, so not until the session's over anyway. But it does take money for people who run for office, and so support the guys that believe the way you believe, and that's your involvement. And communicate to us. If you're reading a web page that has a good piece of info that I don't know, I got a bunch of info today from a good friend. Sent me some links to some stuff on Glenn Beck's, page, and that I can't read it all. I can't find every Supreme Court decision. I'm not a lawyer, but if you come across something, email it to me. So I got cards if you guys want to connect with me to get my email address after. Keep me informed with what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And I promise you, I'll work hard for you and I'll listen. So, thanks, guys. And one last thing, if you get a free moment, let's appreciate the guys here at Freedom Deli who let us set this up. Go in and buy yourself a sandwich and give them some business, okay?
Hey guys, listen, if you get a chance, come by and shake Mark's hand. Senator Green's done a fine job. Do business with our local people here. Anything we can help you with, let us know. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay.
like $5 to advertise on Facebook. So far, people invited like 30 different.
Go get one of his cards. All right. Should work out pretty well.
Scott Douglas.
Oh, that's him.
Hey, it's time to network.